Good morning, Mike. Welcome to the show, and thanks for joining me.
Good morning, Paul. I'm absolutely pleased to be here.
That makes two of us. Well, awesome. Obviously, you and I have known each other for a while, but for those that don't know who Mike Hill is, can you, Mike Payne, excuse me. I just gave up the name of your company. Tell us about your company. Tell us about yourself, and let's get to know you a little bit better.
Great. I'm president of Hill Manufacturing in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Hill's been around since 1976. I bought the company right at 5 years ago, actually, this month. I started full time here 5 years ago this month. We acquired the company in January of 18, and I was transitioning out of my own old role and came over in March full time.
Okay. And tell us about Hill. What do you guys specialize in? What kind of shop are you?
So Hill we're a job shop. We've got since being in business in '76, we've got still a lot of the same key customers probably for the last 30 years. Some of that work's changed, but there are parts on our floor we've been running for 30 to 40 years, and a lot of new stuff as well, but mostly serving the oil and gas market. But a lot of what we make ends up in the oil field one way or another, either directly in the oil field or on a pump truck, something like that. It's not always direct, but it being in Oklahoma,
yeah, sure.
A lot of the OEMs we work with around here are tied to the oil field one way or another.
Okay. So I know that industry is kind of famous for its cycles. Do you see real highs and lows in your workload coming?
It is an absolute roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the cycles of the business over the last 40 years, even it is absolutely it's up and down with the price of a barrel of oil. So in 2020, the day that it closed at negative $20 a barrel or something, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was the same week that the world shut down over COVID.
Yeah.
It was a dark day at Hill. I do remember sitting there watching the news as the price of barrel, went negative, and really wondering what we were going to do. It was tough.
You were only a couple years into it at that point, right?
Yeah, we were 2 years at that point, 2.5 years.
You're like, what the hell did I do?
Right. Yeah. You're going, oh my Lord, what do we do here? Now, the good side of our industry is, I mean, when the highs are high, they're really, really high.
Yeah.
But when the lows are low, they're pretty darn low. So it's a roller coaster. I remember I've told my partner, I said, hey, what's the best part of a roller coaster? So going down, right? I mean, that's the most exciting part, where you have to, on a roller coaster, maybe you just got to get yourself together. But, I think we go through that here too, right? When that oil's going down, and which inevitably you can see it in our backlog and our orders coming in and so forth. You got to dig down, and you got to get tough and get through it.
And what do you do to survive those times? Do you save cash on the good times so you can weather it without having to lay people off or cut hours, or like, what do you do with your team?
I think you do a little bit of everything, right? So if you look historically, I think I know from Hill's background. So I have not actually through a natural dip in the oil and gas market since I've bought Hill. We went through 2020.
Right.
But so I know historically, as the oil market, the energy market in general, comes and goes. Yeah, I mean, you're preparing with cash, you're preparing with workforce, you're preparing with all those things. That happened right before we bought Hill, kind of 16 into 17. There was a dip in the market, and I think everybody in the Oklahoma market anyway that serves that industry had to buckle down. In a lot of cases, owners are dipping back into their personal cash to keep payrolls and keep everything moving forward. And I think if you talk to a lot of the owners that have been through a couple of these cycles, it's a very consistent theme in this market. Right. 2020 was, going into March of 2020, we actually had the largest history at that time in a 42-year history of the company. I mean, we had a backlog that we were concerned how we were going to get the work done. Right. And then there was this market adjustment and, kind of with COVID and with the shutdown and, less air travel and all those things affect the oil market. That we're sitting somewhere probably about this week. Honestly, I think if I remember correctly, it was spring break week in Oklahoma.
It was, yeah,
in 2020, and this is spring break week in Oklahoma in 2023, right? So, and I remember all of those things happening in the same week and going, what do we do? Right? I mean, there was a certain amount of uncertainty, and but we were going into it with an absolutely ginormous backlog. And I called a shop meeting and I said, guys, we got to get this out, right? Like we have a 6-week backlog and we have 3 weeks to get it done, because if it takes any longer than that, we're going to start losing orders. They're going to get pushed out. They're going to get canceled. Right now we've got POs in hand that we can deliver and bill on. Right. And we didn't get the whole backlog out, but we got a good amount of it, probably somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the backlog. Yep. And we buckled down and we got out what we could get. And then the orders quit coming. But fortunately we did have a good, 4 to 6 weeks of work to just hammer down, get done, create cash flow. Right. And then we didn't. Then it was okay. Now what do we do, right? And there's a lot of things we did, and a lot of things we didn't do, but we're still here today. So we obviously rode the wave pretty well. Rode the roller coaster.
All right, I have a bunch of questions. I got to write these down. So you said 4 to 6 weeks. That does not sound, time scale wise, I don't know what the revenue was, but time scale wise, that does not sound like a big backlog to me. I know a lot of shops have backlogs going out many months or even years. Is 4 to 6 weeks a long backlog for your shop?
Going into it, it was. So one of the things Hill had done with that core group of customers, those legacy customers, we really had established kind of a 3 to 4 week
turnaround normally.
Yeah. A lot of that was, some of that was due to, things that we build inventory and have and so forth. But no, one of the things I think in the, nearly 50-year history we've done is we do have a reputation for being able to turn stuff around rather quickly. Kind of post that period, now our normal is 6 weeks. Right. But we're probably 80% repeat jobs, 20% new. So like we're not going through a whole lot of new product development going into things. We do a fair amount of prototype work for a couple of our key customers that kind of require that, extra couple weeks on the front end. But a lot of what we do is repeat work. Okay. Or at least a fair amount of it.
Got it. And so as when things started to dry up, and I'm just curious, even aside from that time, but just in general, just about diversification into other industries. Is that a thing you're thinking about? Is that a key, strategic long-term goal?
Yeah, so it's definitely been. So when we looked at buying Hill, and Paul, but just to give a little bit of background, I had known the owner of Hill for gosh, 25 years.
Okay.
And was actually helping her sell the company prior to me buying it.
Yep.
Again, we can get a little bit more into my background maybe in a little bit, but with my background in transactional work, um, I was, I'd been involved in selling the company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the as when we went to when we evaluated it as an opportunity to buy the company, one of the things we loved was the 40-year history of the company. Um,
Right.
it's a sizable shop in our market. Um, been around for 40 years. Works with the core customers of Hill were probably the three or four largest OEM companies in our market.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also you had a 5 to 6 year history prior to our purchase of a seller wanting to sell, right? So there hadn't been a whole lot of effort in new growth and frankly even keeping up with the latest machining technologies and tooling and ERP systems and all that type of stuff
Mm-hmm.
because it was preparing to sell. Um,
Right.
so we had identified, hey, we've got this great business that has been very successful for 40 years, has a really strong core business with a group of legacy customers that, as long as we keep doing what we're supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
can keep this business successful.
Yep.
But a lot of opportunity for growth, right? And
Right.
growth through not only through the legacy customers, but also through diversification and so forth. So we had been working towards diversification prior to that. The problem we ran into for the 2 years prior to the time period we're talking about is we were so busy we didn't have time to really work with new customers. Right? I mean,
Sure.
we wanted to, and we would develop those relationships, and we would get opportunities. But I think probably as anybody that listens to this podcast knows, I mean, you still have your core customers you got to take care of first, right?
Sure.
So where maybe we had a reputation of delivering parts in 3 to 4 weeks, and people like that. I mean, to maintain that, obviously you're keeping those people forefront. They get priority on machines, they get priority on everything. So it was
Mm-hmm.
hard to take in a new customer and really give them the experience we wanted in a timely manner, right?
Right.
Um, so we did struggle diversifying prior to that. Well, then 2020 hit, and all of a sudden there were no new orders,
Sure.
or very limited amount. And if I had to say there were two great things that came out of that time period, and one of those was it did open the door to a lot of work we had never done before. Um,
Mm.
we started, we picked up a nice local customer that does, a lot of parts related to the firearms industry. We picked up some new OEMs and some trailer manufacturing. I mean, like just different things that we had never touched before. And quite frankly, prior to that time, I don't know that we could have served them all that well. We were so
Mm. Mm-hmm.
overloaded with our OEM, with our legacy work
Sure. Sure.
that we would have had a really hard time um, making a good first impression with them.
Yeah.
But but given the slowdown in our normal amount of business in our normal legacy work, we were able to put our best foot forward and make a good impression. We're still doing work with those companies today.
How
So
did you?
it has helped us diversify.
Yeah. Okay. That is a silver lining. How did you find those new companies?
Just relationships. We still today actually don't have a good history of like a direct sales and marketing effort.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we do have a very strong legacy business in our market.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very fortunate throughout my career to have developed a lot of amazing contacts in our market and outside of that market.
Mm-hmm.
And leveraging those things and pursuing them. Um, I'm sure we'll get into the topic too, but With my background being in transactions and acquisitions, um, my my natural source of growth is also through acquisition.
Hmm.
And as you well know, since we bought Hill 5 years ago, we've bought 4 more shops since.
Right.
And that has, that brings in work, that brings in machines, that brings in people, that has absolutely diversified us.
Hmm.
And the first one of those was in 2020. The first acquisition we made was in 2020, and it opened up a whole new revenue stream for us that we did not have prior to that.
Right.
Um, and again, we've done 4 more since then, and evaluating 3 today. So
Wow.
um, that's just part of my growth strategy. Has been in every business I've ever been in. So
Right. Very cool. So just sticking with that a tiny bit more. So when you had capacity, you just reached out to people you knew and said, "Hey, I have capacity," and the RFQs started coming, or is there more to it than that?
um, well, there's definitely more to it. I mean, again, part of it was relationships,
Hmm.
and in those regards, it sometimes was that simple.
Right.
Um, the outside of that, I mean, yeah, it probably no different, sales cycle than anybody else.
Hmm.
It's just been, developing relationships, developing relationships. I mean, I've lived my entire kind of professional career with, all things being equal, I want to do business with friends, right?
Yeah.
All things not being equal, I want to do business with friends. So, um, just leveraging relationships,
Yeah. Yeah.
and building those, and sometimes they take a really, really long time, and sometimes it's a hit right out of the gate, right?
Right. Right. Very good. All right. So I do want to dig kind of deep into this. You already alluded to it, the story of buying Hill, because one of the more, as you might remember, well, you of course, I'm sure you remember, we did that in my day job. Did a machine shop ownership change conference a couple
Yep.
years ago with Modern Machine Shop magazine, and and the story of you, trying to help Hill sell but not having success for quite a long time, I think is a really interesting story. And then you deciding, the fundamentals well enough because you're in on the inside that you're going to go ahead and make the bet and buy it yourself. Um, I think that, well, I know that story is all too common with other shop owners that don't prepare their businesses well enough for sale when they finally do want to make an exit. So I'd love to get your sort of advice and a little bit of the story of trying to market and sell Hill Manufacturing, and then what takeaways other shop owners could have from your learning and your experience, and even the other 4 you've subsequently bought since.
Sure. So there's, gosh, there's a lot to pull out there, but um, you know, so I mean, Paul, as you know, I spent 15 years buying, selling, funding, managing small and mid-sized businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I think today it's over 113 companies,
Wow.
uh, in in roughly, well, about every industry you can name.
Yep.
You probably couldn't name one that I haven't done a deal in.
Right.
Um, that's been on the buy side, that's been on the sell side, that's been on the investor side,
Mm-hmm.
investee side. I mean, all those things. Anybody that's selling, so when you ask about helping sell, I mean, there's things you have to pay attention to, right? So when you've made that decision that you're going to sell, or even if you're going to sell in 5 years,
Yep.
right? And as you said, you're preparing to sell. What does that mean? A lot of people look at that differently. Like you know, some people think, oh, I need to go update all my equipment so that I have, so if we put it in the realm of a machine shop, right? I
Mm-hmm.
need to have all great equipment on the floor. I
Yep.
need everything perfect. Um, Other people would say, no, I need to. I need to boost my revenue, right? So I'm gonna hire a salesman at $120,000 a year to take me to $5 million or $10 million, whatever the number might be, double the size of my company. The reality is, in this industry, and the people that listen to this, I mean, most people are buying EBITDA, right? They're gonna buy a multiple of your earnings before income tax, depreciation, amortization.
Yep.
And really, even more specifically in this industry, I would say people are buying what you call seller's discretionary earnings, which is being that most people in our industry are very closely held small business owners, right? Maybe an individual owner, maybe a family, maybe two people. Seller's discretionary earnings is basically EBITDA, but it's also the money that flows through that will not continue to flow through. So if you pay for personal car and your family's cell phones and all those types of things, if I'm a buyer, I'm not going to continue paying for your family's cell phones, right? So I'm going to pull those back out of the expenses, and I'm going to get to a number that's SDE, which is basically EBITDA plus discretionary expenses to get to a real number of what I as a buyer can make off of this company. And then I'm going to apply a multiple to it. Could be 3, could be 4, could be 10, whatever I as a buyer, whatever my investment philosophy is. So what a lot of people in all industries make the mistake of is when they start to prepare to sell, is they start to grow what they think looks good, right? Maybe that's top line revenue. Maybe that's a beautiful shop with all new machines, and maybe that's robots all over the place. It could be any number of things that you think look good, but the reality is I'm buying EBITDA, right? So grow your EBITDA, right? I mean, if you want to maximize your purchase price, then maximize your EBITDA or your seller's discretionary earnings. The people lose sight of that in all industries. I can't even begin to tell you how many sellers I've worked with over 20 years to grow, whatever that means to them. My take back to them is, look, let's grow the value, right? Let's not grow the company. Let's grow the value of the company. What grows the value of the company? In some cases, it is top line revenue, right? In some industries, in some markets, it's top line revenue. Maybe it's a strategic customer. Maybe it's diversification. Maybe it's regionally or territory type things. But in a lot of our industry, in the machine shop world, the fabrication world, the metalworking industry, it's EBITDA. So grow EBITDA. Whether that means just tighten up your SG&A expenses, your cost of goods sold, those types of things, you can have a material effect on your EBITDA and have a huge effect. I mean, take that material effect on your EBITDA and multiply it times 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, and you can have a huge effect on your purchase price. The other big thing people don't pay attention to is the sales price allocation. So Paul, you had a machine shop. Let's say I'd have come into you and said, you said, I want $10 million for my shop. And I said, well, I'll pay you 5. And so we're way off, right? But if I can show you that my 5, and that's a big number, but let's say it was, you want 6 and I'm offering 5.
Okay.
If I can show you that my $5 million offer nets you more than your $6 million offer, which offer do you want? Right? I mean, at the end of the day, people get really, really, really caught up in the sales price. I sold my company for $1 million. I always joke, like, no one's ever sold their company for under $1 million. That's what everybody always wants, $1 million.
Sure.
But would you rather me give you $1 million and you net 400, or me give you 800 and you net 6?
Sure.
Right? I mean, like, it's a.
So tell us some of the levers that change that that net?
Well, it's all in the sales price allocation, right? So it's all in, what am I buying? Am I buying the stock versus the assets? So you got to start there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a buyer, if I'm buying assets, I'm going to be able to depreciate those assets. You know, I have some tax advantages to me of buying assets versus buying stock, right? I'm not
Yep.
buying, if I'm buying stock, I'm buying all of your past liabilities. I'm buying all your skeletons in the closet, so forth. I'm going to discount that price for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think this industry is pretty used to asset purchases versus stock purchases, so we probably don't have to talk about that a ton.
Yep.
But even within a asset purchase, I mean, how much is going towards assets versus how much is going towards goodwill versus inventory versus working capital?
Mm-hmm.
All those types of things play into both parties' tax situation,
Right.
right?
Right.
I mean, best case scenario as a buyer, I can buy your entire company and everything that comes along with it with asset value, but that's not realistic, right? Because I mean, if I can buy an equipment asset value, I get to depreciate that much quicker than if it's all in goodwill,
Mm-hmm.
right? Goodwill I have to depreciate over 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
Assets I can depreciate, you know, potentially in the first year, but definitely over a couple of years,
Right.
right? If there's a building involved, if there's, I mean, there's, so I always recommended to buyers and sellers to pay way more attention to the asset allocation and the effect on their personal income taxes or their corporate
Mm-hmm.
income taxes, whatever, than the purchase price, right? The purchase price doesn't mean anything. I could buy a $1 million company for $2 million, and it doesn't make me any difference as a buyer
Right.
because if there is that gap, you're going to deliver to me $1 million in working capital also. So when we talk
Mm-hmm.
about working capital, we talk about AR, AP,
Sure.
cash,
Mm-hmm.
inventory, right? So, yeah, okay, I'll pay you $2 million for your company, but you got to deliver me $1 million of working capital.
Right.
Well, if that doesn't come true, you're going to owe me back money, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can deliver me that $1 million of working capital, then I'm going to pay you $2 million for it.
Right.
Um, so we focus a lot really on the deal, right? I mean, on
Sure. The terms.
the
Yeah.
the later terms. So when you ask, you know, like that series of selling Hill, you know, helping sell Hill to the point where we bought Hill. Um, you know, I love our previous owner. She's a great friend of mine. Had been for years. I spent 3 hours with her yesterday, um, and I think she would admit she wasn't a good seller, right?
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have time for. She did, but she didn't have patience for, you know, bank underwriting and, you know, it was like either buy my company or don't. I'm not going through.
Right.
After she had been through it several times, she didn't want to go. She wanted a real buyer that had money, and it slowed things down.
Like an all cash deal instead of them getting some financing. Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, because anytime you introduce financing, right, you're introducing bank underwriting, which
Sure. Yeah.
now they're going to dig that much deeper into everything, which is fine if you have the patience for it, right? I mean,
Right.
it like in her case, it wasn't that there was anything she didn't want banks to see, or it just, you know, if you can't do the deal, you can't do the deal, right?
Right.
And several of the deals that I had flushed out for during that time was, you know, completely reliant on a bank financing 90% of the deal. Well,
Right.
that's going to be a nightmare from the beginning
Sure.
because
Yep.
first of all, banks aren't going to bank 90% of the deal, right?
Right.
Maybe 80. They're going to prefer 70. Um, and in this industry, she was not unlike a lot of people I've come across. Um, Legacy is very important to them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Hill Manufacturing is named for Cheryl Hill that I bought the company from.
Right.
Um, Her employees have been with her for 10, 15, 20 years.
Right.
Um, she wanted to be proud of Hill Manufacturing for the rest of her life. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I know a lot of people listening to this can say the same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, and, you know, so legacy is important, right? So you you want a buyer that's well capitalized, that can ride the roller coaster,
Hmm.
right? That and owners that have been in this market for 30, 40 years, they understand it takes capital. You're not going to just float through this.
Hmm.
Um, you better have money in the bank to make payroll when times are tough.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've seen several deals in this industry go south because the owner says they're not going to make it through the first downturn,
Right.
and I don't want my employees unemployed. And
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that so there's this whole industry is very close and family driven, and I mean every shop you talk to, I mean they have those key employees that they want to make sure are taken care of in a transaction.
Hmm.
They've taken care of the owner. They want to make sure they're taken care of after the
Yep.
transaction. And I
Absolutely.
think that is a really, really important thing to people, that there is working capital to move forward. So if you're a buyer, right? So we talked about a little bit of the seller side of it, but if you're on the buyer side, you need to know that you can ride that roller coaster, and you need to be able to take that. You need to be able to take that seller and offer that they have confidence in, that their legacy is going to move forward,
Absolutely.
and their employees are going to be okay.
Right. Yeah. This is good stuff. Yeah. I mean, from my own experience, when we sold Pro CNC, um, well, first of all, the best offer we had was someone that wanted to pick up the machines, move them, I think, to Romania, and we were like, "Screw you, get the hell out of here."
Right, right. So the same
Because
thing.
yeah, because this is too important. Our employees are like family. We want them taken care of. So we ended up with a company that was going to double down, invest a lot of money in the company, keep it there, keep all the employees. They were not interested in changing any of that except just investing in it. And that's what they did. And, still to this day, it's going great. Um,
Sure.
so definitely can resonate with that. I There's two things I want to make sure we don't forget. One thing you mentioned, and talking about so the multiple is obviously, if you raise your EBITDA, whatever you multiply that by is going to be a bigger number. But the multiple itself, whether it's a 3 or a 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, that is a huge lever, right? So can you
Absolutely.
talk one of the things that I've always talked about, which I think is true, um, is that you will get a higher multiple on your company if a number of factors are true. Um, if you have, a well diversified customer base, if you have, you're serving maybe a little bit more sort of higher end, in industries and clients, if you have really good systems in place, if the owner is not completely wrapped up in the daily operations and they can't take a vacation because the company will kind of grind to a halt without them there every day.
Right.
Like you came in, you wanted to be an owner operator, but a lot of buyers, like PE firms and such, they don't want that. They want a well-run company that can just keep going. So the next question I'd love to talk about is the question about the multiple itself. So obviously you can increase your EBITDA and that'll be good when you multiply it by a number, but the biggest lever I think is the number you multiply it by. And in my experience, and just kind of what I've believe is true, that there's some levers that owners can pull, some things they can do to increase the actual multiple itself, take it from a 3 to a 5 or a 6. And that would include things like, diversification, what actually industries you serve, how much of your work is repeat versus brand new, possibly, what kind of systems you have in place, whether you're super organized, everyone has defined roles, versus a little bit of a chaotic mess, pirate ship, as some shop owners might call it. Um, and then the big one is how much of the business is wrapped all around the owner doing a lot of different things. Right? You
Right.
came in wanting to be an owner operator, so you were replacing Cheryl. So that was fine. I believe a lot of buyers, especially more strategic ones, PE firms, whatever, they don't want to insert someone, right? They want to buy a fully running, mature business that can keep creating cash flow and EBITDA. And so if that owner can't take a vacation without the place falling apart, that's not going to be a good multiple. So can you speak
Nope.
to some of those things?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. And I think, yeah, at that general sense, probably everybody understands that. But let's kind of talk through what I as a buyer look at on those things. So um, everything you just said is absolutely correct, right? If this company cannot survive, in a recent acquisition we made, the company would not survive without the intervention of a management team, in particular my management team, as we were looking at it, right?
Right.
That's a much lower multiple, 3, than another acquisition we've done that I literally can buy it and it's going to keep on going, right? That maybe now you start looking at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right?
Right.
Absolutely 100% true. And where does that fall in line? I mean, it's everything you said. It's an ERP system. It's online banking. It's everything just being done, right?
Right.
In 5 years, we've grown our company from needing daily intervention to, I'll admit it, I don't do a whole lot anymore, on the day-to-day business of our company. That's why I have time to look at 3 acquisitions right now.
Right.
That's you doubled your multiple right there. So yes,
Right.
you're absolutely correct. You can have a company with a $500,000 EBITDA and you want to grow it to 700 times 3, right? You went from 1.5 to 2.1, you made yourself an extra $600,000.
Sure.
But if you can take the 500 to a 7 at a 4, right? You made over an extra $1 million.
Sure.
So now there's a lot of things that go into that. If I just look at our ecosystem of the deals that we've done, there's been a turnaround acquisition, there's been a succession plan acquisition, there's been a diversification in work acquisition, and there's been 2 diversification in work that Hill will be doing diversification. One was getting in production work, more high quantity production work. The other was getting into a couple of industries that we were not involved in. We paid a higher multiple for those than we did the turnaround, right?
Sure.
Hands down. And that's going to be true in every case. So yes, but especially when you start talking about PEs and so forth, they don't want to run the company, right?
No.
And there's a lot of the smaller acquisitions, and in our industry, this would not be abnormal, where people are acquiring the company for a job, right? I mean, they're going, as you said, they're going to get in, they're going to run.
Sure. Yep.
Maybe they have a specialty in sales or front office work or what, they're going to handle all of that, and it's going to be their day job for the next 20 years. And they're going to draw a salary, and so they're acquiring a company, but they're also acquiring their daily job, right?
Yep.
That is definitely a different multiple than, maybe what you might call a more passive investment of, I'm going to buy this company and it's going to just start paying me a dividend or a distribution every year.
Sure.
And even within that, there can be all sorts of strategic reasons, right? Maybe you're buying or selling a supply chain, right? So like one of the acquisitions we're looking right now actually isn't a shop, but it would be a vertical acquisition for us in our supply chain.
Yep.
And the company can run itself, right? So I won't have to run it, but it is acquiring a large part of my supply chain that I now have more control over, my price, my lead times, so forth. And they already have a successful book of business, right?
Sure.
So,
yep.
that those things change the multiple, which is the trigger on the value. So, back to the example. I mean, you can grow EBITDA and do better, but if you can grow your multiple, you'll even do better than that. In some case, double, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one thing you told me a while back, which I thought was just a fantastic little anecdote, was after you bought Hill, you started cataloging the inspection equipment and all the gauges, which was not previously cataloged. It was just in a room, just a pile of
Just a
stuff.
bunch of equipment, right?
So can you just share a little bit about when you have it organized like that, even something as simple as that you can show the buyer how that affects the value versus, hey, I have some inspection equipment, but it's not all organized and cataloged and all that?
Yeah. So, like in the Hill case, again, think about at that time a 42-year-old shop. You can imagine the amount of tooling and equipment and work holding and fixturing and all that has accumulated over 42 years, right?
Yeah, it could be a lot.
Now, I guess you can say hopefully not a lot of it's 42 years old, but um, but nevertheless, there's old equipment, there's all, and that stuff's hard to put a value on, regardless, right? I mean, that's yeah. See that room over there? It's got a lot of stuff in it. The And that's kind of how most of these deals get. Okay, we're gonna set $20,000 aside in the sales price allocation towards inspection equipment, some number, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But the reality is, when you catalog and you inventory what that is, I mean, as anybody listening to this podcast knows, it's in this industry. That 20 is probably 80.
Yeah, it adds up fast.
Right. And so think about that. I mean, one, I'm only going to pay you $20,000 for it as a buyer, right? I might have paid you 80, might have paid you 60, who knows? But I would have paid, potentially with a good list of what all that stuff is, I would have probably paid more, right? Now again, let's go back to what I said earlier. I'm buying EBITDA, and this now goes back really to sales price allocation more so than always the purchase price, but it does have an effect on the sales price allocation. Right. Well, so now also as a buyer, if in my sales price allocation I paid you $20,000 for all the inspection equipment, and there was a $400,000 worth of goodwill, right? But maybe it should have been $100,000 of inspection equipment and $300,000 of goodwill. Again, back to depreciation. My depreciation now as the buyer,
right?
I could have depreciated $100,000 instead of 20, sure. Right? In those early first few years,
right?
So it absolutely can have an effect on your price. It can absolutely have an effect on your tax situation. All of those types of things, short term and long term, have a real effect, and it goes back to your multiple, right? I mean, if I walk into a company that has everything incredibly well documented and they have true inventory of everything they have, I'm gonna have a better feeling of that company, sure, than if it's like, yeah, we got a bunch of stuff in that room over there, right? And yeah. So if that's organized and inventoried, and I have calibration records, and I have all the things that ISO is going to require, and all those types of things, then maybe if I only went from a 3 to a 3.5 multiple, right? I mean, that's sure. That's a significant amount of money. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars more in your pocket, or maybe millions, depending on the size of the company. Yeah. But so yeah, I mean, all of that stuff, as a buyer, as a seller, have a significant impact on how the transaction is ultimately going to occur.
Yep. So, and I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear you say it. For that person that thinks that I'm just going to buy a bunch of brand new, beautiful equipment on the shop floor when I go to sell this, but they do it with loans, what do you do with the value of the loan? Do you take that right off the price? How does that work?
Well, so everybody, all buyers are different, right? So, I mean, anything I'm saying, you have to account for. This is my
Sure.
buyer philosophy, not everybody's, but generally, and this is a general statement. I think it would occur with most people. Almost any deal we're ever going to do is going to be a cash free, what we call cash free, debt free deal, right? So I'm not taking any of your cash, and I'm not taking any of your debt.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason to build up millions of dollars of cash in the bank,
Right.
right? Because I'm not buying that. You're taking it with you. I don't care if you have $100,000 in the bank or $5 million in the bank. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Same way with debt. Frankly, I don't care. I'm going to pay you what I'm going to pay you for the company, and you're going to pay off the debt.
Right.
So, I mean, am I going to value new equipment higher than old equipment? Absolutely.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
But at the end of the day, you're paying off the debt. So, would a $100,000 lathe that's paid off and has been in service for 15 years be worth more than a $100,000 lathe that you just bought? Sure. But if you owe 90 on one,
Sure.
you're not making any money.
Yeah, we found that out when we went to sell. We had a couple. We didn't have a ton of machines still on loan, but we had a few. And they're like, "Yep, you got to pay that off with the proceeds." Basically,
Right.
It's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
geez."
I don't want your debt now. And of course,
Right.
that all changes in a stock deal, right? If we're doing a stock deal, then I am buying
Mm-hmm.
your liabilities.
Right.
I may require you pay some of them off,
Sure.
but again, just in my situation as a buyer, we typically don't take on any cash. We don't take on any debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, I know that is, especially with so many baby boomers getting to the age where they're probably thinking about, or past thinking about, how do I have a big successful exit out of this business, whether they're selling it or passing it to their family or key employees or whatever. Yeah, I know it's a top of mind for a lot of shop owners. So thank you for all of that.
Sure.
This episode took a slightly different, but I think really valuable turn. Normally, I ask all these other questions, and maybe I'll get to a couple of those, but I'm mindful of time. But no, I like I said before we even started, digging deep into a rabbit hole is often the most interesting and best. And so your experience here has been super valuable. Let's see here. So besides maybe growing by acquisition, what are some of the sort of strategic things you've done since you've owned Hill that you think have been just super winning moves that have really helped the business?
There's a few things, Paul. So we, as I know you're well aware, one of the first moves I made was I knew we needed an ERP system. If you go back to my history, which we haven't even gone back that far, but when I came out of college, I started a software company that I dealt with ERP systems, right? So I was doing shop floor data collection in these massive manufacturers around the country, feeding data to ERP systems.
Mm-hmm.
When we bought Hill, and there was kind of a homegrown, it's called the blue screen.
Death.
Yeah, well, no, it was not the blue screen of death. It was it was a homegrown access database driven,
Sure.
order processing system essentially. I knew that was not sustainable for the growth that we wanted to have. Early on, you and I met after I bought Hill, and we went with ProShop specifically. And honestly, I mean, so we closed out 2022, 5 years of business, just a little bit shy of doubling the size of the company in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just a couple percentage points, and it drove me
Right.
crazy because my goal was to double in 5 years. But I almost made a big order for myself just to reach my goal. um, the I couldn't have done it without processes and a system to do that, right?
Mhm.
Um, Also, we've invested very, very heavily in our culture. Um,
Mhm.
we've, we were very, very fortunate. Hill had a tremendous track record with their employees. We, a lot of the employees that were here when we acquired the company had at that time even been here for 10 to 15 years. And we were concerned that they would make the transition to a new owner,
Mhm.
right? I mean, they were family to the old
Yeah.
owner.
Sure.
Fortunately, with her support, they gave us a chance, and again, fortunately, we proved ourselves to them that we also felt that they were family, and we treated them like family, and so we were able to retain a lot. My biggest concern when we bought Hill, I turned 40, I turned 50 this month, Paul. So I was 45 when we bought it,
Mhm.
44. Um, I was like the third youngest employee.
Wow.
Um,
That's a big difference.
and it was a big concern, right? Like everybody was older than I was. And I thought, okay, if this is going to be a 20-year run, I've got to have people younger than me.
Mhm.
Um,
Sure.
and we have deliberately built a company and a culture to attract and retain people younger than me, um, that that we can train and grow. And I'm really, really proud to say today, I mean, I'd put my crew under the age of 35 up against anybody probably in the country.
Mhm.
I've got half of my workforce is under the age of 40
Mhm.
now, and they are outstanding. um, they are in this is their profession, right? And that was one of the things I really noticed in this industry coming into it, kind of from the outside, not kind of directly from the outside.
Mhm.
My clear delineation between when I looked at my workforce was there's people that treated this as a career and there's people that treated it as a job.
Right.
And the people that treated it as a job was not the people I wanted. I wanted the people that were treating this as a career.
Mhm.
And and we worked hard to develop a culture to attract and retain. I mean, I've got several guys in their mid to late 20s that are running my shop now, um, and they're good. You know, they're they've adopted our policies and our procedures and our systems, and are really leading our shop, even though they don't know the most.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The older guys are still teaching them. The more experienced machinists are still teaching them
Technical skills, things like that.
technical skills, but the leaders of my shop, on the floor and even in the office, are younger, and they're engaged, and they're anxious to learn. I mean, like today, matter of fact, I mean, just by chance today, um, we start I've worked with a local university that has some training and grant dollars available.
Mhm.
These guys are earning accredited college credits, as we start this kind of what we're calling a Hill bachelor's degree. I was able to form my own course, selection of courses. Of We're starting with the leadership training. We're going to go to accounting. We're going to go to supply chain. We're going to go through a series of about 6 courses
Mhm.
that I'm paying for, that they're receiving accredited
Yeah.
transferable college credits, to the tune of about 20 hours,
Yeah.
that over the next probably 18 months,
Mhm.
um, that get us on the same page in the business side of things, right? These guys are great on the shop.
Right.
But when I start talking about P&Ls and I start talking about job costing, and when I start talking about all the things that drive our business forward, I want us all in the same talking the same language, right? I want them to understand what a P&L looks like. I
Mm-hmm.
want them to understand that, at the end of the day, it matters what our revenue minus our cost of goods sold minus our expenses really means,
Sure.
whether that's on a job by job or month by month or
Yeah.
whatever. And so we're starting that process this afternoon with a local university. They're coming on site to do a class. Again, we're starting out with a management leadership class.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these guys that are going to be involved in this had attended college, and they're 15 to 20 hours short of getting a degree. By the time they're done with this, they're going to have their degree, right?
Awesome.
So we're the culture probably is the biggest piece, but the tools that you have to put in place to support the culture, whether it's an ERP system, whether it's inspection plan. I mean, all those types of things are the foundation for hopefully building a place of employment that people want to be. That they want to stay, they want to build a career. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
through our very aggressive approach at growth, through organically and inorganically, through acquisition. Um, as I've expressed to all them guys, I'm not buying companies to make Hill bigger,
Right.
right? I mean, that's great. And yes, I'm a capitalist. I want to make more money. I will never deny that. But my motivation is to provide opportunity for these guys, for this
Mm-hmm.
team,
Mm-hmm.
right? And new people coming into the team. So if I go buy another shop, someone's got to run it,
Yeah.
right? So as
Sure.
I grow people in our environment, then I can hand them the keys to their environment. And we have
Mm-hmm.
an amazing example that's happened over the last year that in a turnaround acquisition we made that I mean, I have a 26-year-old machinist in charge of that company now that has
Incredible.
that has almost tripled their run rate in revenue in the last 6 months.
Holy
Um,
cow. That's
yeah, I
amazing.
mean, from where it was to where it is now, it's almost triple from what it had done the previous 12 months to where the track it's on now. And what he's learned and what he's provided, and what I mean, the greatest pride I take, and just forgive me now if I start to get emotional, but is when I see the changes in their lives, right? I mean, my greatest accomplishments are when the employee tells me they bought their first home and or they had they're so excited about had their first baby, and they these things, those are the things that myself and my partner
Mm-hmm.
drive for.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, I have a lot I want to accomplish personally, um, but I'm okay, right? I mean, like
Sure.
I if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm fine. I could go on cruise control right now, and I'm going to be a happy person for the rest of my life. My motivation is getting everybody else to that point,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so some of the acquisition is to create opportunity for people. Um, some of it, yeah. I mean, we grow, and
Yep.
again, I'm a capitalist. I'm
Sure.
not going to shy away from it. I'm in business to make money. Um, but the things that the effect we're able to have on people's lives is what probably motivates me more than anything. And I think as long as we can continue doing that and develop that culture where people know that, and they know that if they can attend these classes this evening about and get
Mm-hmm.
on the same page with everybody in leadership skills and accounting skills and marketing skills and all those types of things, they're going to have those opportunities as they grow.
Yep.
um, that's what motivates myself, my partner. I mean, those are the things that, I mean, you start making a difference in people's lives, and that's what we're all shooting for. I mean, that's what I'm shooting for. I guess I
Yeah.
can't say all, but I know you well enough to know you feel that way. I know a lot of people in this industry. I mean, I've probably been, as I mentioned earlier, I've been in every industry you can mention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And what I've been most blown away by in this industry, locally, regionally, nationally, is the support everybody gives one another.
Yes,
Um,
sure. Absolutely.
I remember my partner early on asking me, "Who's our biggest competitors?" I'm like, "We don't have any." He goes, "Oh, that's pretty cocky." I'm like, "No, I don't mean because we're so good. I mean because there's a lot of work out there. Um, what's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. We're not fighting over it, right? I mean, sure, we're competing over new work, and I mean, yeah, I want to win the new deal. I want to get that new contract. I want to do all those things. But on the same hand, the same guy I'm competing with, I can call him up tomorrow and say, "Hey, can I borrow some odd size reamer?"
Right.
And he's going to loan it to me, right? I
Sure.
mean,
Yeah.
and I am too. I mean, like this industry supports each other like anything I've ever been involved in,
Yeah. It's
and
really beautiful.
it's an amazing thing. And I mean, like what you guys have done with the kind of the whole community around Pro Shop with the forums and I mean, if people are willingly helping their competition. Show me another industry that's doing that. There's not
Hmm.
one, or at least
Right.
in my experience, there's not one.
Yeah. I've never been in another industry, so I don't know. But I'm glad to hear
Right.
you say that. Wow. Well, it just uh, it underscores for me how, I mean, everything you just said about creating opportunity for your employees, you know, allowing them to buy their first home, feel secure, and having kids, all the things. That is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about supporting this industry, is that it is the bedrock of the economy. There's no greater multiplicative effect in the economy than manufacturing jobs, right? They go on to
Absolutely.
buy food, to buy homes, to buy cars, to buy whatever it is, and
And they're great
and
careers.
yeah, oh
They're
yeah,
great careers.
yeah.
And somehow as a society, I think somewhere along the line, we lost track of that. Um, but I think it's coming back.
It feels like it really is. Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for support for getting into this industry. It's a lot better with you in it, and
Oh, well,
for,
thank you.
for for doing what you're doing, creating a great culture and being a leader in the industry. So this has been an absolute delight, Mike. We didn't. Maybe we'll do a second one because there's so many questions I'm sure people would want to hear about that we didn't get to. But
I'd
yeah,
love
your
to.
your wisdom on the buying and selling of businesses, I know, will be super valuable to a lot of folks. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for the opportunity, Paul. I always enjoy talking with you, and you've been a great friend in the industry. And I know during the dark times of 2020, I mean, I think I probably called you crying once or twice. I mean, it's been a tremendous learning curve. Um, but I love the industry. I love the people I've met, such as yourself and many, many, many others,
Hmm.
and support you guys have given. So I'm always, always, always happy to tell more, help others, get
Yeah,
help from others. I'm
yeah,
certainly by no means, I still feel like I don't know anything. So,
oh yeah,
um, yeah, anytime.
awesome. Well, you keep paying it forward, and yes, thank you, sir. Appreciate this. It's been a great pleasure catching up with you. I look forward to hopefully seeing you before too long, and thank you again. Appreciate your time today,
Thank,
Mike.
thank you, sir.